welcome to the How to Understand and Support Your Child with Anxiety Parent Information Workshop. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to review this information. So we always like to start with a land acknowledgement, really recognizing that it's important for us to remember our role in the land now and in the past and also in the future. So we here in the Durham region respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island. So my name is Kim Sundell. I'm a social worker here at Durham Catholic. I've been with the board for a number of years and worked both in the elementary schools and also in the secondary schools. And one of my passions and one of my huge focus of my work has been around anxiety for students, helping them understand it and also helping them learn how to cope with it. So just a bit of an agenda for the workshop today. So the first thing is obviously giving you lots of information about anxiety and sensitivity in children. It's important to note that when I use the word anxiety, and I do use the words anxiety and sensitivity interchangeably, but when I use the word anxiety, I'm not talking necessarily about a child who's been diagnosed with anxiety, but really a child who's experiencing symptoms. I'm going to talk a lot about how you can talk to your child about their anxiety and worries. Sometimes it can be a bit unique as to how parents can talk to their children best about that. I'm going to talk about ways you can support your child, and also I have a number of resources that I'm going to share with you. So I wanted to mention that our presentation is really based on this book. So you'll see the book there, Keys to Parenting Your Anxious Child. The book was written by Dr. Katerina Manassis. She is a well-known child and adolescent psychiatrist. She taught at University of Toronto and worked at Hospital for Sick Children. She also had a private practice here in Durham region. She is retired now, so she's no longer in practice. But her information is just super, super important. The book is very well written, really good, down-to-earth material for parents. No longer in print, but if you visit her website, you can download a PDF version to look at. Also, lots of material in this workshop from Anxiety Canada. So Anxiety Canada is a very well done website. Lots of information about anxiety for children, for teens, for adults, lots of practical tips, lots of downloadable worksheets and videos, and also a really amazing resource, the Managing Anxiety Plan, the MAP program. So this is a program that's created for parents. It follows a CBT model, which we'll get to a little bit later, and basically week by week provides information about different topics and how you can explain that to your child, but then also some activities that you can do with them, all around learning how to manage anxiety. So I wanted to start, just get us all on the same page about what is anxiety. So this is a video. You'll see in the video Dr. Katerina Manassis. She is the presenter. And this is a video that was created mostly for teachers, but really does a great job of explaining anxiety.
Anxiety is an exaggerated fear response, which means becoming fearful in a situation that's not truly dangerous. And usually with that fear response, we experience it in our bodies. We find our hearts racing, find ourselves sweaty, find ourselves breathing quickly, all of those stress responses in the body. We also find that it affects how we think. So we worry more and think about the worst, most catastrophic outcome of things. And we experience it behaviorally. So we tend to avoid the things that we're anxious about. Well, as a clinician, what we look at is we recognize that everyone gets anxious from time to time, and a certain amount of anxiety is normative. But where we start to consider it an anxiety disorder is when it's interfering in day-to-day life. And there's about 3 types of disorders that are really common in kids. One is separation anxiety, where the child is afraid of being away from their parents, even for short periods of time. A second is generalized anxiety, where a child worries a great deal or asks for reassurance a great deal, and can also have things like tummy aches or difficulty sleeping because they're tense all the time. And then the third is social anxiety, where these children are exquisitely sensitive to embarrassment, and so they avoid situations that might result in embarrassment. The purpose of anxiety is goes way back to the caveman days when people had to run from wild animals and other dangers, and it was adaptive to be very sensitive to cues of danger. So some people developed an exquisitely sensitive response to danger, which is now a little bit excessive, and that's how we believe anxiety originated. Really gradually, year by year. And what tends to happen is the sensitive child, the child that's predisposed to anxiety, in an ideal world, their parents express confidence that they can face their fears, and they're encouraged, and they do go out and they face the things they're afraid of, and the anxiety diminishes. But sometimes parents are not able to do that, and so the anxiety persists, and sometimes other experiences heighten the anxiety further. So a lot of changes, for example, can heighten anxiety. Sometimes normative changes, like moving from one house to another, or starting school, or having a family breakdown. I mean, all of those can certainly heighten anxiety, as well as some truly traumatic events, serious accidents, crimes, things like that. Anxiety can impact students in every aspect of their school life. It can make it difficult to attend school, particularly with separation anxiety, but some of the others as well. It can make it difficult to participate in class. If you can imagine putting up your hand to answer a question, that's risking embarrassment every single time. So for socially anxious kids, that's really difficult. Presentations are terrible for them as well. Working in groups can be difficult for kids who have, again, anxiety about how their peers are going to respond to them. And test taking can be terrible for kids who worry. They can freeze up on tests, or they can become overwhelmed with assignments that are a little bit bigger. So any of those are really common manifestations of anxiety in school-age children. Knowing the situations they are anxious about and gathering that information from the child and the parents both, and then helping them to face that situation gradually with lots of positives for doing so. So, for example, if someone is anxious about large assignments, then you break it into small chunks and give them positives every time they complete a chunk. If someone is anxious about presentations, then you might allow them to present one-to-one with a teacher at first, before they're more comfortable presenting in front of a group. So trying to create those small stepping stones towards dealing with the feared situation, and then providing lots of positives for doing so. I hope that this type of education can avoid making anxiety worse for those who are predisposed, and can also encourage teachers to work constructively with students and parents and professionals if needed around the students who have more significant issues.
So always such a good video to review. I think that one of the things that always stands out in my mind is just this idea that some people are predisposed to overthinking and to worrying, and facing fears is really one of the secrets to managing anxiety, and doing it kind of in a staged way. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, one of the things we know about anxiety amongst children and youth is that it's one of the most common psychological distress. So, we see lots and lots of kids who are struggling with their worries, and more all the time. We know that it affects 1 in 10 school-aged youth, and we also know that it can interfere in children's academic life, in their social life, can kind of prevent them from being able to do things that they want or need to do in their life. Dr. Manassas touched on these. So some of the most common types of anxiety disorders that we see in students are separation anxiety. So kids who struggle to separate from parents. This is something that can happen at any point in their life, but there are definitely peaks where we see lots more stress around separating. So students who are going to school for the first time, students who are transitioning between elementary school and high school. These are times where, separating, worrying about their parents' health, worried about being away from them can be a struggle. Specific phobias. So that's where someone has a specific fear about a specific item or situation that they just cannot talk themselves out of. So for example, if somebody had a phobia about dogs, nothing that you could say about how great dogs are could help them feel okay with that. Social anxiety, kids who struggle with just being judged by others, worry that they don't do well enough, always worried about perfection, worried about being teased, making mistakes. Those are kids who struggle with social anxiety. And generalist anxiety, that child who just worries about everything from storms to bugs to their food having germs to needing to wash their hands, just everything under the sun they worry about and need support with. Lots of noticeable impacts of anxiety on children. So we know that it can change. We can see changes in their affect. So some of the feelings that they show, they can be extremes or excessive. So their behaviors or their feelings can be really big and go on for a long time. We can see changes in their behavior. We can see changes in the way that they think or some of the thoughts that they share with us. They can be a bit more dependent on parents for certain tasks or activities in their life. And we can obviously see changes in their functioning, so their ability to do certain things that might be expected of a child their age. This slide is always super helpful to me because lots of times we can see things and think that they're one way, but they actually could be something else. So students or children who are struggling with defiance or refusal, so just absolutely refusing to do certain tasks, we might think of that as disobedience or not following the rules or expectations, but it could be avoidance of anxiety-provoking event. So they could be really, really putting up a front to facing that fear. Sometimes we see kids who have a real need for control with their peers, with their environment, with their schoolwork. And a lot of times that could be an attempt to manage their anxiety. Kids who are feeling really out of control in their thoughts sometimes really kind of look for that control in other places. ADHD type behaviors, so fidgety, not able to sit still, moving around lots, not able to keep their minds focused. Lots of times, if a student is struggling with anxiety, that could be a restlessness or an agitation. It could be them not being comfortable, not being able to slow down their minds. And also physical complaints. So students who or kids who struggle with stomach aches or headaches, nausea. Lots of times we may wonder if they're sick, but if we notice that it's all happening after the weekend, it kind of has some themes or some patterns, a lot of times that could be a symptom of anxiety for a child. So here's a quick video, again, from School Mental Health Assist, just kind of highlighting the difference between adaptive and problematic anxiety.
Anxiety, like any mental health disorder, occurs on a continuum. So we see things that get into a mild camp or a moderate problematic camp, and then there's the severe camp. So naturally, there's some things in school, and a good deal about school and learning things that you don't know a lot about cause us to be nervous, and that's normal. And we want students to understand that that's the normal part of growing up. It's normal for them, and it's normal for us as educators and as mental health support people supporting their learning. So it's normal to be nervous about speaking in class, or sometimes we ask students to read aloud in class or answer a question in front of the whole class. It's normal to be anxious about those things or a little bit nervous. Where we get into sort of the moderate range is where we start to see a little bit of avoidance, where whenever we have to read out loud, we're going to the bathroom or we're sharpening a pencil. So we're trying to avoid those things rather than work through them and get beyond them on the other side. Things that are in the severe area in terms of anxiety are where the anxious symptomatology gets in the way of someone's emotional, daily functioning, academic achievement, that kind of thing, gets in the way of social functioning with other children, with other classmates. And when we see those kinds of functional impairments happening, we know that something is really problematic and might need some more attention or intervention.
So anxiety, absolutely normal, and we can probably all relate to that, but just kind of watching, I guess, the levels and the impairment for students. So this is one of the tools that a lot of us use to just make a decision about whether something needs more attention than what it has. So we call this the 4Ds. So really noticing whether there's a change in disproportion. So is the intensity and the frequency of anxiety, so how strong they're feeling it and how often, is that happening more than we would expect for the situation? Duration, anxiety is normal, but if students aren't getting over it, that can sometimes be something that may lead us to thinking they need more help. So going back to school at the start of the school year with a new teacher and new peers absolutely makes sense to be nervous. But if you're getting into October and they're still hating school every day and not able to go, it's something to wonder about. Disruption, so how much it's getting in the way of their life. If they're avoiding things and not able to participate in school and social events, obviously that's a huge disruption. And distress levels, so normal upset to be expected with things that are hard for us. But if it's much more extreme than we would expect, that's something that we may be wondering more about. So when is anxiety a problem? So if you're noticing ongoing complaints, psychosomatic complaints, so upset stomach, headache, difficulties catching their breath, if you're noticing ongoing crying or difficulties calming, especially coming back from school breaks, or even going to school every day. If you're noticing an emotional response that's excessive to the situation, that would be something to wonder about, or when to think anxiety might be getting in the way. Also, trouble going to sleep or staying asleep. Lots of kids, when it's that quiet, settle down tonight, falling asleep is really, really hard. Their minds really, really turn on, and it's hard for them to settle. And just as much, kids who have anxiety wake up through the night. They just can't kind of settle into a deep sleep. Anxiety might be a problem if you notice that they're spending lots of time on their own, really struggling with joining into social groups or making friends, if they're refusing to participate in family events or social events, or obviously if they're refusing to attend school. This is a video that we show. This one is for teenagers, but there's also a video that is for children, and it really kind of helps them see the impact on their body or the symptoms that they may notice, and why that's an anxiety response.
You know what anxiety feels like. We all do. Everyone experiences anxiety in some way or another. It's something that connects all of us together. Why we feel anxiety and what it really is, that may surprise you. Without anxiety, we'd all be in serious trouble. As soon as your brain senses you're in danger, a little piece of it, called the amygdala, kicks in. It gets your body ready to react. That could mean fight,
run away, or shut down. It's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. This reaction goes back millions of years to our distant animal ancestors. Animals whose amygdalae were more sensitive to danger were more likely to stay alive and off the menu. Over millions of generations, this developed into the system we all know as anxiety. So you see, anxiety itself is not all bad. But when there's no immediate life or death threat, and your amygdala keeps telling your body that you're in danger, that's when anxiety becomes a problem. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between getting eaten and public speaking or failing a test. Human society has only existed for a relatively short time. It's messy and complicated and confusing, and our amygdalae just haven't had time to catch up. So sometimes, when we're in uncomfortable situations, our brains misread the risk and overreact. Our hearts beat faster and we breathe heavily, pulling more oxygen into our bodies. The muscles in our arms and legs tense up and fill with blood. Our skin perspires to cool us down. This would all be great if we needed to fight or run, but instead, we just feel tense and sweaty. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When things trigger our anxiety, sometimes we try to avoid them, like our ancestors avoiding a predator. But that can cause problems when those triggers are important parts of life, like going to school or meeting new people, things that won't just give up and go away. So how does knowing all this help? Well, it starts with remembering what's really going on. There's nothing physically wrong with you. It's just your amygdala trying to tell you it thinks you're in danger, even if it gets confused about how much danger you're really in. Understanding why we feel anxiety is an important step in learning to manage it.
I love showing that video because sometimes it's really, really eye-opening for kids to know that there's a biological reason why they have some of their symptoms of anxiety. And as they learn how to cope, they can really reduce those symptoms. So, okay, on the screen here, you'll see a stress vulnerability model. And so I think it's always super important to touch on this because you can see the teeter-totter in front of you. And so on the one side, kind of weighing things down, we have stressors. We all have them. And so our teeter-totter is going to be weighed down with stressors at some point in our life. People who have an innate vulnerability to worry or to overthink, obviously that coupled with stressors can really weigh that side down. I guess the upside and the side that keeps me going and keeps me teaching about coping skills is really the idea that with supports and coping skills, you can balance that teeter-totter and or even tip it. And so that's why learning about anxiety and learning how to cope is just so important because it can really balance out any stressors or innate vulnerabilities that people have. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, will my child outgrow their anxiety? And so one of the things that we know is that anxiety can really be perpetuated by avoidance. And while avoidance feels like the most natural thing to do when we're facing something that we're scared about, it really can grow anxiety and be more disabling and get in the way of people's lives. And so facing fears, it decreases sensitivity to those fears and really decreases overall anxiety. So although the idea of facing fears can be really daunting for people, it really does make a difference. And it's kind of important to focus on the idea that there may not be a cure for anxiety. An overthinker, an anxious thinker will always be an anxious thinker, but it's more about learning how to cope and how to manage that so that it's not interfering in life. Always important to touch on the range of severity for anxiety-related problems. So you'll see on the one side, we have kids who may have mild anxiety, really described as shy or sensitive. That's a large percentage of the population. So that's 8% of the population. On the other side, we have severe. Kids, students who are extremely anxious. Approximately 2% of the population, very persistent, so happening in all kinds of situations situations, often there's a family history. These are kids who may be reaching out for counseling, they may be working with a doctor, really interfering in life. I guess the positive about either end of this continuum is that the coping skills are the same. So whether you have mild anxiety or you have severe anxiety, some of the coping skills that work with either end of the continuum. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time focused on how you can talk to your child about anxiety. Sometimes anxiety can be scary for us to talk about too. And so it's important to know that the goal of talking to your child isn't to eliminate their anxiety. So what they worry about is real to them, and there's really not a lot of ways to talk them out of it or to convince them not to feel that way. But it really is helping them understand it and learn to manage it. I really plead, I guess, with parents to not avoid things just because it makes someone anxious. So it can be easy for kids to do that and easy for us as parents. It's hard for us to see our kids hurting or upset. But avoiding, like I've talked about, makes things much more difficult. It's important to express positive but realistic expectations. So not expecting a child who is struggling to lay in their bed at night without you to have a sleepover at their grandparents' house. So staging that in a way that's positive but more realistic. And important that you respect your child's feelings but don't empower them. So it's kind of a fine balance between telling them that you understand but not saying that, of course, they should be worried about that, and that is a very scary thing to face. I suggest that people don't ask leading questions. Lots of times we can put words in our kids' mouth and answer the question for them. And especially in the start when kids are trying to talk about their anxiety, we really have to give some space and time for them to share and be careful that we don't put words in their mouth. Try really hard not to reinforce their fears. So kind of add on to their worries with other reasons that they can worry. Encouraging them to tolerate their anxiety. So knowing that they are going to feel worried about things, but they can handle it and they can get through it and they will survive it. Important to try to keep the anticipatory period short. Lots of times giving warnings are super helpful for kids that are worrying, but it's important to just keep those tight. So if you have a student who is afraid of going to doctor's appointments, letting them know that they're going maybe the morning of, as opposed to 3 days before. Always helps to think things through with your child. So really thinking out loud with them a lot of the different ways that a situation could go. It helps them come up with material to use if they have to face that fear. And also trying to model healthy ways of managing anxiety. So a lot of us who have kids with worries also are a bit of worriers ourselves. And so showing them how we relax our bodies, how we distract our minds, how we think things through can be super helpful for kids. So just some basic steps. So step one, encouraging your child to open up about their worries and fears. So really getting that conversation started. Lots of times kids may be able to do this, but if not, here's some ideas. Sometimes parents need to describe a situation that they have seen their child in or noticed their child having anxiety with. So really kind of putting that out there. Sometimes it's helpful for us to describe a time that we've been anxious, so they can kind of in a third person way relate to that. Similarly, describing a situation where another child might be anxious. So just kind of more general, other children, another child you've seen or heard about, and lots of times just asking them directly if they've ever felt that way. They can sometimes answer and usually will answer that question. The next step is teaching your child about anxiety. So really describing the symptoms that someone might feel, some of that fight, flight, freeze material. You could show them some of the videos videos on Anxiety Canada. You could even use personalized stories. So there's lots of books and there's lots of material out there where reading a story about anxiety and some of those symptoms can be helpful. And then the next step is helping your child recognize anxiety and how it presents for them. So some of the physical thoughts, they may have physical feelings, actions, behaviors, and again, noticing that in your child, but also using general examples if you need to. You'll see on the screen cognitive behavioral therapy, so CBT. CBT is one of the most researched therapies. Most of the research is with adults, but there's much more research coming out with kids. And it's really understanding the connection between what we think, how that impacts what we feel, and then how that impacts what we do. And so by changing anything in this triad, we can make a difference with our worries. Wanted to show you a quick video on the negative cycle of anxiety and what's important for us to understand about that.
The negative cycle of anxiety. Learning about cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can help us to understand how we think and feel in different situations. A certain situation might make us feel anxious or low, but there's usually more to it than just those emotions. As well as the emotions, the situation will make us have particular thoughts, engage in certain behaviors, and perhaps experience some unwanted physical sensations. This diagram, sometimes called the hot cross bun model, shows how these four components are all interlinked and connected to each other, and that they may be what keep our feelings of anxiety going. That is to say, they may be maintaining the cycle of anxiety. More often than not, we just notice how situations make us feel emotionally. We notice when we feel shy or nervous in class, or when we're feeling anxious about schoolwork. But let's take a look at how each of the other three components can be impacted when we're in an anxious situation. First, let's focus on our thoughts. Loads of thoughts swirl in our minds when we find ourselves in a challenging situation, or even when we're experiencing something completely new for the first time. These thoughts are often along the lines of, something bad is going to happen and I'm not going to be able to cope. For example, it could be that you're quite scared of public speaking, and when it comes to doing a presentation in class, your thoughts are along the lines of, I'll mess up my speech, the whole class will laugh at me, and I won't be able to handle that. In addition to these thoughts, you might notice physical sensations in your body, such as a faster heart rate, feeling shaky or sweaty, or you might get that strange feeling of butterflies in your stomach. Sometimes these sensations can be quite uncomfortable, but they are just our body's natural biological response to feeling stressed or anxious, and help us in preparing to take action in these situations. In other words, it's our body telling us that we're in danger, when actually we're not really. It's also known as our fight or flight response, which you can learn more about by watching one of our other videos. So, a situation is making us feel anxious, have lots of anxious negative thoughts, and feel quite uncomfortable in our bodies. This then may lead to us changing our behaviour. We do things to help us feel better or to help us cope with the situation. This may even involve avoiding it altogether. While this may be a relief in the short term, it means we never learn to face our fears and never teach ourselves how to tame the anxious feelings. For example, leaving the class just before it's your turn to do that presentation will mean that you don't ever get to find out whether you would have been able to cope with the situation. When it comes to the next time you have to do a presentation in class, your thoughts will be exactly the same. You will probably still think that you'll mess up, that everyone will laugh, and that you won't be able to handle it. The anxious feelings and uncomfortable physical sensations therefore never go away, and the vicious cycle starts to form. What you can hopefully see now is that this vicious cycle of negativity that we're creating is made worse by our negative thoughts and behaviours. Therefore, to change how we feel in these anxiety-provoking situations, we must change how we think and how we behave. This is how we go about breaking out of the vicious cycle and start forming one that impacts how we think and feel in a more positive way. One of the ways we can do this is through managing our thoughts. But how? By identifying our negative thoughts and then learning how to challenge them. If you would like to learn more about these skills, watch our videos called Identifying Negative Thoughts, Falling into a Thinking Trap, and our other video, Managing Negative Thoughts, Thought Challenge Buster. This video was created by the Tower Hamlets Education Wellbeing Service.
So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time sharing with you some community resources that we have available to us here in the Durham region. We're very lucky. We have some great support, so I wanted to pass some of them along to you. So you'll see in the left-hand corner, Durham Community Health Center. That's formerly known as CARIA. Some people may be familiar with that name. They've recently changed their names. This is a health center that provides a huge range of services. So they have doctors available, nurse practitioners. They also have dietitians, counselors. So tons of opportunities for support with that center. Following that, you'll see 2 crisis lines that are available for use for us here in Durham. So the first one is 905-666-0483. That crisis line is run by Durham Mental Health Services. So again, you can call in crisis or if you're looking for some connection to community supports. There's also 1-855-310-COPE. That's a crisis line that's in cooperation with an agency in York Region. But again, another resource in crisis where people can call or text to get some immediate support. You'll see there the social work access line. This is a Durham Catholic social work initiative. We always make sure to mention that it's not a live line, so you do end up leaving a message or submitting an online form. But when you do that, you do have the opportunity to get a call back from one of the social workers. So not something to use in crisis, but it is something to use if you're wanting to kind of talk things out with someone to make some decisions about next steps. Kinark Children and Youth Services, they do central intake for their own agency, but also many children's mental health agencies in our community. And so by booking a central intake, they'll ask you some questions, really to assess the best fit for you in the community, and they'll connect you with that service. And also Catholic Family Services. So they provide individual, family, even couples counseling. They also have some group programs available. So that's another resource that people use quite often in Durham Region. And finally, some apps. There are tons of great apps out there, and so I wanted to just narrow it down to some of my favorites. You'll see there's Smiling Mind and Headspace. Those are mindfulness relaxation apps, and so we know that relaxing our mind and body are super important, even if people aren't kind of working on specific CBT strategies. And so these are 2 apps that provide guided activities. They provide reminders. They have activities for all ages and for all issues. And so those are 2 of my favorite. The remaining apps that you'll see on the screen are all CBT-based apps. So they focus on helping people understand what anxiety is, what some of their symptoms might be, the changes in their body, their thoughts, and then how to expose themselves to that and challenge themselves a little bit. So you'll see there SAM, Clear Fear, My Thought Journal, and Mindshift. Molehill is actually a CBT-based app that's specific for people who have been diagnosed with ASD. And so a lot of these apps, when you're looking at them, they may be seem more geared towards adults, but great resources for you as parents to use and walk your child through. So they may not be able to use them independently, but you may be able to support them in using them. So that's it. That's all I have for you now. I appreciate you all taking the time to watch this parent workshop. I hope that it's been helpful to you, and I hope that you're able to get the support and the information that you need. Thank you.